With the release of Borderlands 4 seemingly right around the corner, I wanted to make a video giving my predictions on what I think will be in the game at launch, as well as talk about what I'd like to see in the future. Without further ado, let's get into it. As we all know, the last mainline Borderlands game, Borderlands 3, had a less than stellar story, with some even going as far as to say it's the worst story they've ever had the displeasure of sitting through. But we all know that Borderlands 3 couldn't possibly have a worse story than this train wreck.
It's Pete. It's Pete. Why do you think it's called Piss Wash? How did I get the name?
It's in my mouth!
That is amazingly funny.
What a shame. I personally believe that the Borderlands 4 story will be right behind Borderlands 2, if not better. And believe me, I know that that is a bold, and I mean bold claim. But just hear me out. With the release of Tiny Tina's Wonderlands, the storytelling took a dramatic leap in quality, and in all honesty, I'd even go as far as to say that in terms of storytelling, Wonderlands is second to only Borderlands 2. So, if we discard the movie as it's not really relevant to the games,
know your fucking place, trash!
We see that Gearbox heard the community loud and clear with Wonderlands. Not only that though, Sam Winkler confirmed that Borderlands 4 will be mostly moving away from the quote, toilet humor that so many hated in Borderlands 3, with him saying, and I quote, Borderlands 4 is our most ambitious game yet. In service of that, I'm happy to say that I've gotten to work with some of the funniest people I know as contract writers. I'll be retweeting them as they post about it, though not all may still be on this site. Not at liberty to talk much about the content of BL4, but I remain firm in my criticisms of BL3's overabundance of toilet humor. I'm not gonna say that there's no toilets, but if the word skibbity ships in the game under my watch, I'm gonna cry real tears. Paul Tassi joked that we were gonna have a gun called the Haktua, and a fellow dev asked me if it was real, and I wanted to put my hand down the sink grinder. All of this information leads me to believe that Borderlands 4 will have one of the best stories we've ever had in the franchise, if not, at the very least, a more serious one. Moving on to the engine. I know in my last video I was telling everybody to be cautious about Borderlands 4 due to it being developed on Unreal Engine 5, but I want to talk about the advantages that I could see Gearbox using to make Borderlands 4 the best feeling and best playing game to date. The main one being loading screens. We've seen Randy Pitchford use the words seamless world, which to me sounds like they've implemented a type of transition, much like the last games, but they would be instant. For example, let's say I just finished my quest and I have to go back to Sanctuary to turn it in. Instead of teleporting into a loading screen, then spawning in and turning the quest in, we might just walk through a portal, therefore instantly loading another map with zero loading time, meaning less time staring at loading screens and more time having fun. That's not all though, because to me, this screams better or even overhauled farming. At the moment, the best way to farm in every Borderlands game is save quit farming, but with the new engine, we may see an entirely new way to farm, such as respawnable bosses like the ones from the Wonderlands Redux mod. The community has been begging for a better way to farm in co-op, as every time you save quit in co-op, the game will disband your group, making it incredibly frustrating to farm in group play. This new engine could be the change that Gearbox needed to implement a better system. Speaking on farming, in Borderlands 3, we only had the normal base rarities white, green, blue, purple, and legendary. The fans, to put it lightly, were incredibly disappointed as Borderlands 2 had all the base rarities that I just mentioned, plus E-Tech, Seraph, Rainbow Rarity, and Pearlescence. We later learned that the reason that Borderlands 3 only had the base rarities was because of console limitations. So, now that we're into a new generation of consoles, the likelihood of Borderlands 4 having more rarities is very high, and we've already seen a rainbow glow around some uniques. Whether that changes the weapon in any meaningful way or not, we don't know. But it's a good sign for the future. If anything, maybe the rainbow glow around the guns are an enhanced legendary weapon like the chaotic variants from Wonderlands. Alright, now on to the things that I hope are in the game, with the first being dialogue skip. Even though I said earlier in the video that I think the story will be great, I still want dialogue skip for subsequent playthroughs, and I'm sure I'm not the only one that thinks that this is a necessity for the games moving forward. Not to mention, if the story turns out to be awful, now I and many others can just skip it, therefore removing the bloat from all our playthroughs. The second thing I'd like to see at launch preferably is dedicated loot drops, as ever since the pre-sequel, Gearbox has been dropping the ball on dedicated loot drops, and without dedicated drops, the series feels awful. I mean, there are a lot of people that play Borderlands solely for the dedicated loot, and without it, I'm sure many players would be angry and disappointed that something so crucial to the games could be overlooked again. Also, if you don't know what dedicated loot drops are, an example would be Kilovolt always dropping the 9V SMG in Borderlands 3, or Savage Lee always dropping the Unkempt Herald in Borderlands 2. These drops are of course weighted, with a % chance to drop, but it makes gearing a nice, smooth progression that you can plan out instead of hoping to get lucky during each playthrough. The third feature that I hope comes with Borderlands 4 is takedowns, as well as standalone raid bosses. But first, just hear me out, cause I have some ideas. Simply put, the takedowns in Borderlands 3 were some of the most replayable and fun content in the game. And they added raid bosses, so obviously I'd like to see them return in Borderlands 4. But I'd like to see a few changes to them. One change I'd make is to try and make them 15 minutes or less, as the Guardian takedown in Borderlands 3 is a bit boring after the first crystal room and just seemingly drags on forever. The next change I'd make is re-farmable raid bosses. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, in BO3, when you completed a takedown, you got rewarded with loot, and that was it. I think if the player completes a takedown, they should unlock the ability to farm the raid bosses at the end for the rewards, therefore satisfying the players that don't like running through the whole thing many times over, but also giving the option to do so if you'd like. And because I know people would say that running a takedown twice with a system like that would be pointless, the devs can make it so that running the whole takedown instead of just farming the boss at the end would give you a guaranteed dedicated drop to balance it out. The fourth thing I'd like to see in Borderlands 4 is actual endgame content. I'm not talking another mayhem mode or OP level rehash. I'm talking an actual piece of endgame content that I can look forward to grinding when I beat the campaign. Every time a Borderlands game gets released, the quote-unquote endgame is just a number that gets bigger. Instead, and I know that this will be controversial, give us something like we had with the Wonderlands Chaos Chambers.
But, you know, make it not bad.
I say this because Borderlands, at least in my opinion, has never really had real endgame content other than running through true Vault Hunter mode. For example, in Path of Exile and Last Epoch, they have a system where when you beat the campaign, you unlock maps or monoliths, but they're virtually the same. These offer content that keep the players engaged even after you beat the campaign. This is where Borderlands always lacks and needs, in my honest opinion, to get right in Borderlands 4. Last but not least, I would like to see new playable Vault Hunters added throughout the game's lifecycle. In Borderlands 2, we got Krieg and Gage, and ever since then, we've had... yeah, nothing. The reason I like to see DLC Vault Hunters is because once the game has been out for so long, the original 4 characters get a little too repetitive, but adding 2 more in as DLC, paid or not, could make the game feel fresh again in a way that new takedowns, headhunters, and even DLCs just can't. Because building characters and finding out what can do the most damage is what Borderlands has always been about. Oh, and the loot. Can't forget the loot. I really only have one main prediction for the future, and that's the release date of the game. If I'm being optimistic, I would say the release date would be in March. Personally though, I think that's too early in the year, but we also have to remember that they can't release too late into the year because GTA 6 is supposed to release Q4 of 2025. So, with that knowledge, I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that the release date will be Friday, May 23rd, 2025. If that's right, holy, I am lucky. Anyways, with all that being said, what do you guys want to see in Borderlands 4? Let me know in the comments below, and if I get enough of them, I'll make a video on them. If you've enjoyed this video, drop me a like and consider subscribing. I'd love to have you around. Anyways, I love y'all, see you in the next video, have a good day, and goodbye.